So let me set up the parameters here. I want you to think about this seriously.
Yeah.
Somebody let's say a niece, has passed away. You think something's going on that the police aren't onto, right? Something it's mysterious circumstances, much like this book, died from a heart failure in a spooky way. You find evidence that her and her friends, who all have died, watched a movie together, and you hunt it down. This has all been, totally ignored by the police. You find the movie. Do you watch the movie? And also assume that this is in a world where you haven't seen The Ring. Welcome, friends, to episode 354 of the Ink to Film podcast, where we read the book and then see the movie. I'm writer Luke Elliott.
And I'm filmmaker James Bailey.
And this week we discuss Koji Suzuki's 1991 novel, Ring. So here we are with a classic of horror, one that is kind of a modern classic, especially on the American side. Like, this was a film that came out, 2002? I saw it in the theaters. I don't know if I've seen it since, maybe like one time in the like a few years after the fact, but I definitely haven't seen it in a long time. But I feel like this was such a big horror moment in America. I just remember all my friends talking about this movie, and it was one that I didn't know was an adaptation until fairly recently. And so, yeah, I'm excited to get into this one, man.
Yeah, I don't know that I saw it in the theater, but I do know that I saw it soon after, and it was like, people would talk about it in like hushed tones and stuff. We were young, obviously, and that sort of like ghost Japanese horror had like a moment where it just like The Grudge eventually would come, and
The Grudge came after this, yeah.
But the Ring, I remember being so like specific and like felt so unique, and it felt so new.
Yeah.
And like I think it honestly introduced a lot of American audiences to like Japanese horror in this way, and some of these like ghost stories that like are kind of baked into Japanese like history and myth.
And this story in particular too, a little bit.
Yeah, and then what this has gone on to mean, and all like the sequel novels that I know are there, and
it's a whole series of books, which we'll talk about.
Yeah. But I mean, I love this movie when it came out. I remember it being one of those ones that I would talk to my friends about, because it was like approachable horror also. Like, it wasn't like absolutely horrific, but it was incredibly intense, and like this idea of like the videotape being passed on. And of course, I didn't see it in the theater. Me and my friends are passing around like a VHS or maybe DVD at that point. And how that kind of feels like once you watch it, it's like it kind of imprints on you, and you're like, oh shit, am I gonna die in 7 days?
Yeah.
And
that's one of the things that made it such a fantastic movie to make, because it becomes like the change of medium. Because if you don't know, in the book, it is still a movie that they watch. Because I thought that was a little different, right? Whereas if you make a movie out of it, you're inherently implying that like you're watching it too now. So and they really leaned into that, like the curse of this movie, like you were going to die within 7 days after watching it. And it was just like, you couldn't not think about it when you watch this movie. And it's just creepy enough to where it really worked. And I feel like this came off the heels of like something like Blair Witch Project, which would have come out a little bit before this, but it's not found footage. But there's an element of like the characters find some footage that they watch. So like it plays a little bit with that found footage subgenre of horror, and that's always been fascinating to me. I love the idea, like there's a certain mystique around finding a forgotten video or forgotten dusty piece of media that you watch, and there's something horrific on it, and it like either makes you go insane or it makes you die or whatever it is, something terrifying in there. Man, it's always so effective. Like, I love that in everything I see it in, basically, and it's kind of at the heart of this one.
And I hate to be the person that's like, my generation had the best, but like this was such a moment for like the early 2000s. It just doesn't feel the same if this kind of film comes out now. It just like something about like the technology of the time, and kind of like the news cycle of the time, or at least like the media cycle, like what people were getting and how much longer it could linger in people's minds.
Well, everything's digital now. So first off, the physical media aspect of it would be weird. And then also like we live in a world where The Ring has come out, right? So like you fund like a certain point, like this story got told, and then now we have to like react to it, and anything that comes after it is going to kind of have to exist in a world where this story has already been told. But that shows how like foundational and just like groundbreaking this was, and it's really interesting to look at it in that sense as like a piece of horror history.
I wanted to ask you this too. I haven't seen this movie in like 10, 12, maybe 15 years.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna say like 20 years for me. I think I haven't
yeah.
seen this in a long time.
So I'm gonna be really excited. There's so much that I don't remember about it, but in reading this story, I like it really. And as time has gone on, I've connected with so many more Japanese stories, and I just know so much more. I've been studying Japanese as a language for a while, and culture that gives me so much more context to view this through. And it's so interesting to me, because oftentimes when something's so inherently Japanese and it's adapted as like an American version, sometimes like because that's the other element of this, is I think it was a Japanese film before it was an American film. Yeah.
I honestly don't remember a ton about it. Like I remember certain iconic scenes, but outside of that, like the like plot of the film is very vague, and especially like who the characters are. So I know who our main characters are in this book, which we'll get into, and I'm like, I feel like this is pretty different. Maybe there's some similar characters, but I think the focus is different. We'll touch on all that next week, which we should go ahead and say we're going to cover the American remake as our main line film episode, but this becomes a prime contender. I think the original Japanese film, which I assume we can find with English subtitles, so we can follow along, would be a prime contender for like a bonus episode that we would want to tackle to see how it's different.
And I know I have seen the original and also the American version.
Oh, you have? Okay, I definitely have not.
I might be merging those in my memory as well. So this is such an inherently Japanese story, and for it to be like kind of Americanized and turned into an American film that then was so successful. In reading this, I was like, there's so many elements of it that just feel so much more true, in my memory at least, to this story. But there's also some things that I want to say right off the bat too. I actually found incredibly difficult to navigate with this story, and honestly, I found myself for one of the first times ever being like, maybe I should text Luke and say that we shouldn't continue reading this, because it was there's a specific character that is so off-putting that I genuinely hated reading.
So I was gonna say maybe we should lead off with some trigger warnings, because we're gonna get into some topics, because it's in the book, that are potentially very troubling for people. And the first of which is sexual assault is going to be talked about at least a little bit, as we talk about what happens in the book. And one of the characters is sort of celebrates this about himself. So we're going to, dissect that and talk about what's going on there as much as we can. And then there's also things about gender. I'm trying not to like spoil too much about the book, but it could like, it was written in 1991. And I would say I don't think it was handled particularly well. And there's some potentially troubling and like othering language used and ideas around it that I don't think have aged particularly well. So we're going to touch on this stuff and try and navigate it as best we can, but it'll probably be a bit clumsy. So just be aware that that's something that we are trying to be as mindful of as we can be, but there could be some potentially triggering stuff in there for people.
Yeah, definitely. And like, there's a part of me that thinks like the messaging of the time, the author was trying to add some element of, I don't know, fairly progressive or at least like representing different types of people. But in doing it the way that he did, it just did not come together.
I think
it did not work.
It's kind of that like being afraid of something you don't quite understand and like making it into a monster. And there's a bit of that goes on, I think.
Yeah. But then interestingly, just like trying to skirt the spoilers of this, there's also like kind of a cultural icon of a horror character that comes out of this, even with troubling elements that like could hamper the story and do hamper the story, in my opinion. So yeah, it'll be interesting to dig more into that.
Yeah. So man, overall, I would say my memory of The Ring as a franchise is positive. I always recognize that it was like we were borrowing it. Essentially, it was an American remake. But I feel like it's a pretty good one, and I'm excited to rewatch it. I know there's like a film within a film that's the actual cursed media, and I feel like that is something that has just always stuck with me as just like a particularly creepy moment in my history of watching movies, where like they did such a good job of just making it unsettling and weird and feel cursed, and so many cool things about it. There's some great reveals we can get into as we go through, but I'm excited to get to this movie. But the book is similar but pretty different, and we'll break down a lot of the ways that it's different. Although with the caveat of we haven't rewatched the movie yet, so it's probably not fresh in our heads. But like, there's definitely things that are not in this book that I remember being in the movie.
And the other thing that I wanted to say, we were just talking about like when this movie came out, just history with the material. This was a period when like I was like, I guess I'd call it like less cynical about some horror in general. And I think I could enjoy horror. I mean, I enjoy almost all horror that I watch, whether I think it's good or bad. But this was a particular era when like almost everything scared me and I loved being scared by it. So like watching this movie hit so squarely, and in my memory of it was really solid for that era and was really cool to like, and it was, like I said, it was approachable. So it wasn't like the thing that like I don't know, you could tell your parents you watched it and stuff. Like, at least for me, like it was a scenario where I wasn't like, oh, it's the worst thing possible. Cause it's got like, it's a ghost story. So at the end of the day, like you have to kind of seed it that way.
Yeah. This is a movie I remember thinking wasn't like, I was like, there's no way it's going to be as scary as a lot of this like advertising is making it out to be. But it was like, it lived up to the hype a little bit. Like I remember watching it and there's a certain moment that has stuck with me forever since I saw it, outside of watching the sort of cursed media. But again, I don't want to spoil things too much because this is like, I mean, it's not super new, but also like there's a possibility people haven't seen or don't know what The Ring is. So we can get into that as we go. Speaking of, I want to talk a little bit about the author, what I was able to find about Koji Suzuki. And then we can move into our actual plot breakdown and we'll start getting into spoilers. So if you're ready, let's talk about Koji Suzuki. All right, so also caveat, I'm going to try my best at some of these names. James has been learning a little bit of Japanese, so he's probably a little better than me at some of these pronunciations, but forgive me if I butcher any of them. Again, I'm trying. So Koji Suzuki was born in 1957 in Hamamatsu in southwest of Tokyo. He would attend university where he majored in French. After graduating, he held numerous jobs, including a stint as a cram school teacher, which I'm not sure exactly what a cram school teacher is, but that's what I saw. This is from like, I think like his like HarperCollins or publisher website. I forget if it was HarperCollins or not.
I mean, there is like sort of an exam culture for young people in Japan. So I think it's just a scenario where it's like, I need emergency help and students.
So that you think that's what a cram school teacher is?
I think so.
Like cramming
like,
for a test?
I think so. Like trying to kind of tutoring. It would be my assumption.
But I saw here that it said he was an unorthodox one who loved telling scary stories to entertain his students. He also holds a first-class yachting license and has crossed the U.S. from Key West to Los Angeles on his motorcycle. He's the father of 2 daughters, and he is a respected authority on child rearing and has written numerous works on the subject. Outside of his horror books, that's what I was seeing. He's most well known for is like writings on parenting.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah. He acquired his expertise while he was still a struggling writer and house husband. He also has translated a children's book into Japanese, The Little Sod Diaries. In 1990, his first full-length book, Paradise, won the Japanese Fantasy Novel Award and launched his career as a fiction writer. Ring, written with a baby on his lap, catapulted him to fame, selling 2.3 million copies in Japan alone. The sequels Spiral and Loop cemented his reputation as a world-class talent. He is often called, and can you predict this? He is often called the Japanese
Stephen King.
Yep. Stephen King of Japan.
Of course.
Suzuki has played a crucial role in establishing mainstream credentials for horror novels in his own country. He is based in Tokyo but loves to travel. So that's a lot of what I could find about his like personal life. I did see this little anecdote where he talked about coming up with the idea for this. At first, I didn't have a story. I didn't even have an idea. I started out with 4 people who were going to share a strange experience, but I was just writing off the top of my head, not knowing where I was going. In my study, I had music playing and sunlight was streaming in from a window. An odd feeling came over me, and looking at the side of my desk, I saw a videotape. That's when it hit me. Why don't I have them watch a video together? And that's the origin of this thought. And like, what an amazing moment. Like, it's always funny when you think back about this, right? Like, he had this little thought, and this would change the course of his life because he would write this story, which would become this iconic franchise that would completely change his life. It's really amazing to think of that, right? When Ring was published, it would actually launch a horror boom in Japan. It was something that like he was credited with launching this kind of resurgence of horror. And I think it's important to note 1991. I think that feels more modern because it is 90s, but it's early 90s, right? Like this is almost an 80s novel. This is a pretty old novel. And it didn't come into our zeitgeist until 2002. But it's important, I think, to remember its time period. So yeah, it kicked off a new surge of Japanese horror.
Yeah, it's interesting. There, like Japan has a history of like demons and yokai, these ghost stories, a lot of like different like horror elements, and it's interesting to think of a time. And I think we see this in America as well as a culture. Like things ebb and flow, and it's this idea that maybe this is a downswing as far as popularity for horror, and then The Ring comes out, and like I can't tell you the number of anime that I've seen that are probably Ring inspired with like horror elements and demons and that kind of stuff, like maybe coming back. I mean, I don't know, demons, ghosts, like those kinds of like supernatural entities coming back into like Japanese fiction. So maybe you can draw it all back to this guy.
Yeah, maybe you can. He's certainly influential in that. So as far as his bibliography, he has the Ring series, his primary, most successful series. In that we have Ring, which we read. We have Spiral, the follow-up to this, Loop, which will come out in 1998. And then we have a short story collection called Birthday, which came out in 99. And then he returned to this series with S in 2012 and Tide in 2013. So that's 6 books, 5 of them novels, one of them a collection. It also has a couple of manga series that were made from it. In addition to that, he has written 5 standalone novels and several other short story collections, including one that is called Dark Water, which I believe the short story in that Dark Water collection was the basis for the film Dark Water, starring Jennifer Connelly, which I never saw, but I remember seeing trailers for, and is one that we've had on our list as like a potential thing we could cover because I learned it was an adaptation. So we could potentially return to him for something outside of The Ring in Dark Water. Now, I thought, and maybe I heard this from somebody who got it wrong, but I was under the impression that The Grudge was also adapted off of something from his work. But that does not seem to be the case from what I was seeing.
I didn't think it was the same creative. I just thought maybe in the same vein. And that actually makes me think about something else we've covered on the podcast. With this idea of Ring, Spiral, all these other things around the early 90s, it's hard for me not to wonder if he was sort of in conversation with Junji Ito. And we talked about Uzumaki and all these spirals and the horror elements. I mean, I don't know. It's a big country.
Yes, true.
But I think at least they may at least be aware of each other's work. I would definitely hazard a guess at that. And it's cool to think about that. Like maybe this is like they're both like part of a resurgence in horror, like we've been talking about.
Yeah. So speaking of the adaptations, there have been a lot of movies made off of this. The very first one, Ring, was actually 1995, and it was a TV film. So I'm not sure if this is the most famous version, because then there was another version that came out in 98, also called Ring, or Ringu. And I feel like that one might be the more famous one. I'm not sure. 1998 might be the big one.
Yeah, 98's the
yeah.
More
So, but
one.
there was a 3 years before that, like a made-for-TV movie version of it.
Pretty wild.
And then we started having a bunch of sequels that would come out, including the Ring Virus in 99, Ring 2 in 99. This is all over in Japan. Mm-hmm. And then finally, The Ring 2002 comes out as the sort of American remake. We also get a movie called Dark Water, the Japanese version. Then Dark Water 2005 would come out, the American remake of the Japanese version of the adaptation of his short story. Then we get The Ring 2, which was a movie I completely forgot existed, but I think I might have seen. I couldn't tell you anything about that movie, but I think I saw it. That was 2005. Apparently he also wrote a short story that was adapted into Open Water 2. Do you remember the Open Water franchise?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
He wrote a story that was adapted into the second one, apparently. And it was like pitched as or it was like implied that it was based on a true story, but it was actually just based off of like his short story. So I don't know what happened with that, but apparently Open Water is an adaptation of one of his stories. And then there would be numerous other Japanese adaptations: Sadako 3D, Sadako 3D 2, Sadako versus Kayako, which I don't know what that is. And then Rings 2017. I think was another one that I want to say was American. It's like the third Ring movie. Yeah. American 2017. So I have not seen that. That's one I didn't see, but I think I saw a trailer for it.
Yeah, I didn't watch that one either. but crazy because that's when we started the podcast. So, you know,
Yeah.
not that relatively, not that old.
Not that old. So anyway, yeah, lots of adaptations made, but it seems like really fundamentally The Ring is his franchise. And I would say that's a major difference between him and someone like Stephen King, is that it seems like, I mean, you could say Dark Water is something, you know, something different, but it seems like he's fundamentally known for one major franchise. Rather than having such a sort of wide-ranging career. But still, very influential, and it's a big series that's been adapted many times. Yeah, that's what I could find about him. Again, there's probably more stuff in Japanese out there, but this is what I was able to find in sort of English language. It seems like he is read, but it's mostly by people who are like curious about the origins of the Ring film. But yeah, this isn't one that like I had been hearing a lot about or like seeing a bunch of people talking about. So I don't know how popular he is as among English readers, but yeah, definitely interesting, and I'm excited to talk about the book with you.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of different bonus episode material in there with different sequels and all kinds of stuff that we could dig into at some point. But yeah, this book, just getting into it a little bit more.
Should I read the opening plot so we can establish who the characters are? Yeah, so we're going to dive into it. We'll start doing some spoilers. Here we go. Let's set the table. After finding out that 3 teenagers died at the same time and in the same bizarre manner as his niece, reporter Kazuki Asakawa of Daily News starts a personal investigation. His search leads him to South Hakone Pacific Land Lodge, a resort where the youths were together 1 week before their deaths. There he finds a mysterious, unmarked videotape which shows a 20-minute sequence of abstract and real scenes and ends with a text warning that the viewer has 1 week to live. The next part, which supposedly explains the charm, a means of avoiding death, is overwritten by an advertisement. The tape terrifies Asakawa. Desperate to avert his fate, he takes the tape and enlists the help of his old high school friend, Ryūji Takayama, now a university philosophy professor. Intrigued, Ryūji watches the tape and asks for a copy to study at home, to which Asakawa obliges. While Ryūji dissects the film footage to determine where it had been shot and broadcast, Asakawa chases other leads. He goes home only to learn that his wife watched the tape with their infant daughter on her lap out of curiosity. Okay, so that was a big moment. We can get into other stuff, but that was like a cool like hook moment. I remember like when I read this, like, oh, this is the part where every now and then when you're reading a book and you get to a part and it just really is like, okay, now I'm in. It was when he discovered that she and his daughter had watched it, because it was a little too easy when he felt like it was just going to be him and he hadn't involved like anybody else yet, and it was like, oh shit, they've seen it too now, and like the stakes just get amped up so much in that moment. I thought it was just a really cool one. But let's back up and talk about our 2 main dudes here, because they're both pretty terrible, one more than the other, but they're both pretty damn bad.
Yep, that's like a reveal that kind of really brings you in. And these guys have been kind of cavalier about how they have 7 days, and they don't seem to be like dealing with the weight of it so much. I mean, Asakawa is a little bit, but as much as that moment may have pulled me in and really, really hooked me, there's moments with Ryūji that happened here fairly early on that completely pulled me out and honestly had me to the point where I was like, is this worth continuing?
Absolutely repulsive.
And yeah. And it's a scenario where like I am someone who will go on the journey for an entire story with what the artist wants to do.
Yeah.
This was a scenario that felt like it had no merit. And to me, that's just like a reason to not do it. And I'm like, if you just remove this wholesale from the story, it would be so much more beloved of a novel, in my opinion. But to get into it some, we're going to talk about some sexual assault here. So
yeah, discussions around it, at least. Yeah.
This is a emboldened rapist who is out on the loose. And he's told his friend many times about his actions, and it seems that he's continuing to do some of those actions.
He claims this is something he's still doing. Yeah.
Asakawa is a reporter who you would think would have some moral integrity to report this.
The way that Asakawa reacts to it is insane, because he's like, oh, I can't believe he did that. Well, I didn't tell anybody, of course. And whenever I hang out with him, I'm like, man, I just can't believe you did that. And our friendship really grew from there. And I'm like, what? He's like, he becomes friends with the guy. He thinks it's not good that he is an avowed serial rapist, but he's certainly not going to tell anybody about it. And he's going to just kind of keep it as a secret between the two of them. It's so fucking weird. And I'm like, why? because the guy's like got confidence, I guess, is what the kind of he's always had a confident way about him that I liked.
I think that he's got he's got an attitude and like an approach at the world of like he doesn't care if he dies, and that's why he pulls him into the scenario, and he kind of knew that he's like seedy kind of person.
Yeah.
But let's get into the fact that he is like, my wife just doesn't like this guy. She doesn't like him around.
Surprise.
And then like near the end, like not near the end, but as time goes on, he's like, maybe this guy shouldn't come to my home where my wife and child are.
Yeah, probably not a good idea.
I'm like, this guy is absolutely out of his mind.
And like we're talking like
reprehensible.
Like this guy seems like a serial killer for one too, because like the way he describes it is that he literally like home invasions and attacks a woman who's a stranger to him. And
he's like conflicted about it, and that's what the author is like.
He's like,
trying
I
to
can't
be
believe.
Like, oh, he's conflicted though, so it's a bad thing.
Yeah, he kind of knows it's a bad thing. Yeah. Okay. But yet it's something that he still claims to continue to do. We'll talk about why we're saying claims and stuff, because this comes back again later and casts some doubt on whether or not this is true. But we don't know this when we're first presented with it. And I don't know that it really matters, because even if it's not true, he believes it's true. Asakawa believes it's true. So I'm still going, why the fuck would you hang out with this guy? Why would this be someone you would associate with in any way? And how are you not like telling somebody about this? It's insane. He's like literally covering up crimes when he's not reporting this.
And that's the thing, as much as Ryūji is just a detestable character in so many ways, the fact that Asakawa is not doing anything about it also makes him like, it puts him in league with him to where I'm like, both of these guys are terrible. I hate both of them. And then they get to the point where they have watched the tape and I'm like, good. All right, let's see if you guys fucking make it 7 days.
Yeah.
And
I did not feel any sympathy for them, and yeah. So all this stuff, like you said, like I'm down for troubling art. I'm down for art about people who are morally bankrupt, detestable people. I don't have to like characters. I just need to find them interesting. And I can go along for the journey, right? But there's another element of it where, I think there's some very real discussions about the ethics around certain things and whether or not depictions of things can be harmful. And this certainly seemed, by the way it was presented, to be handling it as if it was super, almost like something you could just shrug off.
Yeah.
Like it was normalized in a weird way, and it was like, this is no big deal. Of course, this is, I don't know. It just felt kind of gross, and it felt like the author agreed with a lot of this sentiment, and I don't know if that's true, but that's the way it read. And I do want to grant, we also are reading a translation, right? We're not reading it in the original Japanese. Some of this could be lost in translation, for sure. And we don't also have the cultural touchstones of Japan, which are different than the U.S., and so who knows what kind of things we might not be aware of or ignorant of around this. But all I can do is read it as American in 2025 when I'm reading it and go, oh my God, this stuff is pretty tough. So we definitely have to, like, I don't know, highlight it and condemn when we encounter stuff like this, because it's pretty bad.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I was thinking about the translation, and I do want to talk about some of the writing of the translation as well, because I found it to be like very like bland, I would say, in some senses.
Not saying it was a terrible translation, because it was okay. It was fine.
Yeah, it was readable.
I didn't think it was particularly spectacular, but it was certainly readable and didn't pose other huge hurdles, which I've encountered before in other books. So
yeah, it didn't blow me away. And it's one of those things where it's like, I would like to get like the pure version of it.
Translation is by Robert B. Romer and Glenn Wally, just for the record.
And there was a part of me that's wondering about this translation, but there's so much smoke that there has to be fire, that I do think that like these characters, like this is what the overall sentiment of these two characters, I assume, is.
I just wanted to highlight all this, and then I think we should move on. We can, I'm not saying we can't touch it anymore, but I just want to move on and talk about more of like what actually goes on in this book. Now that we've sort of highlighted that this is a big stumbling block. It was a stumbling block for both of us, and I think it will be to anybody who reads it. Honestly, but so if you go into this book, just be aware that it is there, and you can't ignore it, because it is one of the two main characters, and there's a lot of it that is discussed, and we can talk about why, some of the reasons why I think it was like structurally included. For one, you already touched on one of the reasons why I think it was, is that we have to be somewhat okay with Asakawa's decision to let this guy watch the video, because it feels like, if you are being a decent person, you should not show this to anyone if you believe that it is going to kill you. So choosing to let this guy get involved, you have to buy that the guy's kind of shitty enough to where Asakawa would be like, if he ends up dying, it's okay with me.
Yeah.
And two, like, the guy has to be so weird and like he's kind of demented and like he has this fucked up view on life. And he talks about like how if he could like watch the extinction of the universe, he'd like basically be like ejaculating onto it or something. There's like a weird metaphor about him like standing over a hole with the extinction of the human race and he's going to ejaculate into it. It was like, what? And so he says some crazy shit like this, and you're like, I guess this guy can watch the video, okay. And so I think that was one element of it. They wanted to make this guy detestable enough to where we were on board with Asakawa showing him the video or allowing him to watch it. Okay, I'll give you that. And then we can tie it in more to some other stuff that happens later when we return to this. But yeah, what a weird setup. But ultimately, it's the same as the movie in the sense of like, there's something has happened. 4 teenagers have died, which, by the way, the other thing, Asakawa, he's just super dismissive of these children dying, right? Like, every time they talk about them, they're, like, making jokes about how they were, like, 2 of them were, like, fooling around in a car, and, like, they find this to be, like, hilarious in some ways, or just, like, it's, like, so not serious. It's very weird.
I found it so funny that he was talking to another, like, investigator reporter, and he was, like, each of them kept saying, like, they were about to do it. They were doing it. And I was like, maybe that's a translation thing, but it's like such a like a just say they were gonna have sex or say
it's like
whatever.
Puerile, and like they're just like joking about the fact that like one of them had their underwear off or something, and it's like I don't know, weird. And maybe this is supposed to be like we're supposed to think these people are terrible. I just don't know that it was effective enough for me where I like knew that was the purpose of this. Like I wasn't sure how I was supposed to feel about it.
Well, like you said, he's not investigating this. He's investigating this because he thinks it's a big scoop, not because he cares about the people who died.
And it's like literally his like
it's
cousin
his
or
niece,
somebody, right? His niece died. Yeah.
He like goes to the house and he's like rummaging through her shit and like has no sympathy for the mother and like all this stuff. Like he's just like he's fully on this investigation. And so he's just like. I was excited too because I'm like I didn't remember the story being so much about the investigation, so I'm like I like this like this lens that we're viewing it through.
That's the focus of the book, really. It's all about this investigation. Yeah.
And like the way that it comes about, he's like in a taxi, and the taxi driver says, "Hey, this guy just like keeled over and died on my taxi recently," and like how that the breadcrumbs kind of lead you down. I was like, this is a fun introduction. Then we meet Ryūji, and I was like, what's going on here? And then like I was like, all right, let's try to move past this. And as time went, we got up to what we talked about already, where they had watched the tapes. They were kind of freaking out about it. He believed it. Asakawa believed it because he knew all these people who died. And he was talking about how, like, if he had watched it, he normally would have laughed at it. But he knew that the 4 people who were connected to the tape ended up dying. So it's like a serious thing now. And Ryūji, of course, doesn't really believe it. Is kind of being, like, kind of cavalier about it, doesn't care. And then the big bombshell of, oh, my God, my wife and daughter watched it. And then you're like...
So I mean... I feel like we've been pretty critical, I think rightfully so, for some of the stuff that's gone on here. But let's talk about like what's working here, because I don't want to give the implication that nothing's working. I do think the way a lot of this stuff is written, with the mysterious deaths and the looks on their faces and how they seem to be like haunted by something that we can't see. There's a lot of weirdness and fear of the unknown that I think is deployed really well here, to where a lot of this stuff is really eerie. And I found myself wondering, like, what did she see in her last moments, right? And so I'm wondering this alongside Asakawa, and it's very creepy. And so I think all that works really well. And then him going out to this cabin, and he's like all secluded, and he finally finds this video and he watches it, and it's weird. And like, I don't know, all this stuff is working really well, I thought.
Yeah. I would say outside of some of the stuff that goes on near the end, and then the stuff with Ryūji, just to reiterate, I really like the structure of the story. I like the thrust of the story. I like a lot about it. And that investigation element. Getting to the tape. The way that it was kind of described was so cool and very different from what I remember in that movie. There's like a volcano.
I think every version, from what I understand, it's like a little different. Like the book version is different from the Japanese film version, and then the American film version makes some other changes, and they're all a little different.
I love how abstract it was in the book, like very abstract. And then there's like people speaking. There's a woman speaking at one point, and then there's like identifiable like landmarks and things.
Faces, like 100 faces that become 1,000 faces. There's like blood or something red, and there's a volcano, as you said.
And then it's visceral too. Like the character is like, oh, my hands are wet, and like there's a baby's
there's
face
a baby,
and baby
with
crying,
like covered
and,
in amniotic fluid, and he can like feel that he's holding it, so it like gives him this extra sensory perception, which is a really cool detail that you can get in a book. I agree. The thing of him watching it was very cool. I also kind of loved that there was this like part where it's like, and now we're going to tell you how to avert this death. The only way to fix it is, and then it was recorded over with like some bullshit ad.
And I visually saw that happen. Like I can see the cut that you would make where it was like, oh God, I'm gonna die, and then boop to like some advertisement, just like people speaking and stuff.
And this, I don't remember normal. This being in the ring. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't remember this part of it. I thought it was actually kind of a funny twist of like the most important part is going to tell you how to avert your fate. Got recorded over by the previous person who just like didn't believe it, I guess, is the implication. We don't ever really find out, at least in this book, for sure why it got recorded over, but the thought is it must have just been like a prank or a joke of like they didn't take it seriously, so they recorded over it and thought it would be funny for the next person that they wouldn't have the solution.
He does some investigation into how did this get recorded, and like there's a kid that's recording his favorite TV show when they're on vacation with a tape, and then like it comes out that then he's thinking that there's like a rogue hijacking of like a feed, basically of like a transmission.
We'll get into that next. That's our next section here, but I wanted to stop and do a little bit of one of our recurring segments, the Would You Do It game. James, I wanted to ask you, so let me set up the parameters here. I want you to think about this seriously.
Yeah.
Somebody, let's say a niece has passed away. You think something's going on that the police aren't onto, right? Something is mysterious circumstances, much like this book, died from a heart failure in a spooky way. You find evidence that her and her friends, who all have died, watched a movie together, and you hunt it down, and this has all been, totally ignored by the police. You find the movie. This is the video that they watched. Do you watch the movie? And also assume that this is in a world where you haven't seen The Ring. So this is you have not seen The Ring, if that's possible to ignore. But I'm just curious, like with the proof of these deaths, would there be enough there to where you would actually buy into the idea that this could legitimately be cursed media and you wouldn't watch it? Or do you think you would watch it and your curiosity would get the best of you?
I mean, with all of that, I'm a curious by nature person, with the idea that someone I know has died. I'm investigating. I personally in life don't believe in a lot of the supernatural stuff. I sometimes I like to put myself in that headspace, but I don't. Mm-hmm. I'm watching the tape.
Yeah.
Now, if you're saying if I understand the context, absolutely not. I'm not watching the tape, but I would definitely get sucked into the trap of this tape, and I'd end up watching it. And then the question becomes, then do I pass it on to somebody else? Do I, in order to save myself? Because that's like kind of the ongoing thing. But same question for you. Would you do it?
Yeah. No, yeah, I'm with you, man. I would be the worst person to show this to, because I'd be like, shit, I gotta re-upload this to YouTube and show people or something. You know what I mean? I'd be like, because I'm not gonna believe it until I literally die, probably, if it was real. But I just don't believe in stuff like this. So no matter what, I would totally watch it. First, I would be too curious. Now, would I be a little creeped out? Probably, but I don't think it'd be enough to keep me from watching it. I'd be so in, and like, let us know in the comments whether or not you'd watch it. Like maybe you're all, clip more like smarter than us, because you could argue like it's pretty dumb after you've seen the evidence of this killing 4 people. But I just wouldn't be able to make the leap that like the watching of the movie caused it. Like I wouldn't be able to get there.
People have a better survival instinct than us, probably.
Yeah.
But I mean, I have friends who would probably be like, nope.
Yeah.
Nope,
for sure.
I'm out. Like. Whereas I'm like curious, I'm like, I gotta know, and like there's no chance it's gonna happen to me too. Like what's gonna take me out? And like, I don't know, it's an interesting proposition. Now the other side of the coin is like, would you then pass it on to somebody else? I like to think that I would just take it to the grave, but I will say, having watched it and then learning what we learned in the story, I would be trying to save. And like what happens near the end of the story we can talk about, but I would be trying to make things right. I'd be like, if somehow I was able to get the evidence and the information, I'd be like, yeah, this is like, you don't fucking tempt spirits, you don't do all this stuff that's like, getting in the bad graces of this character in the first place. And in that way, I'd be like proper burial, like all that other stuff. I like to think that I would do the right thing as far as that.
Yeah.
But would I pass it on to somebody else? We got to talk about that maybe in a couple more sections of the story.
Okay, well, let's get into this investigation. I want to talk about how it actually plays out in the book because, again, I think it's pretty different. All right, so the next day, Ryūji figures that the moments of near blackness appearing during real scenes are likely caused by the recording device blinking. The two traveled to Kamakura and access a personal archive of paranormal cases found in Japan. Searching for individuals with psychic photography ability, they discover the record of Sadako Yamamura, a young woman who was born on Izu Oshima Island. Ryūji theorizes that Sadako is already dead, and the last part of the tape contains what she wanted viewers to accomplish. To figure it out, they travel to Izu Oshima to learn about her past. Stuck on the island because of a heavy storm, the pair cannot unearth anything that helps solve the mystery. Even with the help of Oshima and Yoshino, colleagues of Asakawa, they only manage to piece together Sadako's timeline up to 30 years ago. With their deadline approaching, Ryūji has the idea to retrace the existence of the resort lodge. Yoshino finds out that the resort used to be a tuberculosis sanatorium where Sadako's father lived in his last days. The only surviving staff member working there in the period near Sadako's disappearance is general practitioner Nagao Jotaro. All right, so let's stop there, talk a little bit about this investigation. I also absolutely love this reveal, and I think something like this might happen in the movie, but like the discovery that and honestly the thought that this could even be the case of the black flickers being blinking is so cool. Yeah. This is one of the things that really sells this premise to me. The idea of this psychic recording where we're not watching something that was recorded from a video camera. We're watching someone's lived experience, including their blinks. And it's so cool because like, we don't notice our own blinking. So I love that this is something that somewhere along the way, Suzuki like decided this was going to go in the book, like had this idea. Like it's such a clever thing. Like I am obsessed with this detail. It's so good.
It's super good. I really find it fascinating. And like, how you would react to that. Like if even if you're like, it's not even feasible. You're like, how is this even possible? And then, but like to learn that detail, and then it really puts you in the shoes of the character going through this stuff too. You get to see all of that from
such a cool reveal too. Like this is just one of those like chilling moments when you read it and you're just like, oh fuck, I can't believe. Like, I don't know, it's so cool. The idea of psychic photography. I love the way this is set up. This reminds me of a Stephen King novel. I will fully grant you that. He loves his like psychic children and stuff. So like we'll deal with that. But like I love the touching on some stuff that is like probably real, quote unquote, paranormal research. Psychic photography is a quote unquote real thing, right? So he's extrapolating out from some like actual pseudoscience, things that have happened, and the idea being like, what if instead of just a photo, a psychic movie could be developed? And the only way that this could happen is if this character, Sadako, is so powerful that she's able to create something that's never been seen before. And so you can see how this kind of grew organically, but I love the way it's presented and like slowly uncovered through this investigation. I'm actually currently writing a novel that is about an investigation and has like two characters who are journalists investigating something. And so like reading this right now, like obviously very different, but like, I don't know, it was just fun to read a book that like has some similarities in some cool ways.
Yeah.
And I was definitely feeling inspired after reading this too, to like get back into my draft.
Cool. I like when even with supernatural elements, the breadcrumbs are laid out nice enough in an investigation like this that you can like, you're still on board and you can buy it in this world and in this context. And it still makes all these reveals like so fascinating. And I love Japan's like obsession with supernatural. Like a lot of stories with like psychics and aliens and ghosts and all that stuff. Like that's my favorite shit too. So like whenever they tell a story, whenever there is a story that's presented in this way, I find it to be so fascinating. And then to take it and throw it in the lens of like horror and then some of these horrific events that this character goes through. Yeah, it you start to kind of don't think we're quite there yet in the plot synopsis, but you start to understand why this curse is around.
I like the way that the video is used. Like, this is the key to understanding what happened. The moment it shows the eruption, they have the idea of like, well, this eruption is a very specific eruption that occurred at a specific time. So we can sort of figure it out when this would have aired, right? Because if this is recorded off of TV, like you can make certain assumptions. And so they're able to use this, and they figure out, they're able to tie all this through researching the paranormal files and stuff. And they're able to figure out that this Sadako's mother killed herself by like throwing herself into this volcano, which seems like a very extra way of doing it. But I mean, I'm sure people have done that before, but like, I don't know. It's almost like feels like it's like something from like Jason and the Argonauts or something. Like you're throwing casting yourself into a volcano. I don't know. It's very, very extra. But we learn about the sort of creepy history behind that, where she was this like well-known psychic who had the ability to predict people's futures. Also, it seemed like her abilities were tied to the uncovering of this like statue that they pulled out from the water. And like when they pulled this statue out, it like made her able to have these psychic abilities. Do you remember what the name of that statue was? I have it.
No, I don't remember, but I do think, it has to do with that like ancient supernatural kind of stuff. I think that like connects with her and like awakens her in a sense.
Yeah, so there's an implication, right, that there's something else going on. It's not necessarily just a self-realized psychic ability that is sort of manifesting in spooky ways. It's also maybe tied to like an ancient evil, which is always a little fun, like almost Lovecraftian touch that you're throwing.
And does feel a little bit Stephen King-ish for sure.
Sure.
Like having this over, these evil entities and all of this like kind of supernatural power, and maybe that'll be explored at some point.
It's like if you have psychic abilities, you're now more open to or susceptible to influence from these other beings.
Like having this not just be a one-off and having other supernatural beings kind of around, you can understand where sequels can go. And like obviously Sadako as a character is very important, and like some of the stuff that goes on with that.
Yeah, so Sadako is the daughter. So the psychic woman, she has this thing where she's going to do like a display of her abilities, but then I think she ends up having migraines over it, and she has to cancel. And then after she cancels, there's like all these like papers are written, and like literally like newspaper articles about calling her a fraud, and she was exposed as this fraudster. This makes her really deeply depressed, and potentially leads to her committing suicide. Somewhere along the way, she has her daughter Sadako, and she also has, I think, a young boy who ends up dying when he's quite young under somewhat mysterious circumstances, if I'm reading between the lines. Then like it's like her father, Sadako's father, goes to this tuberculosis sanatorium, and this introduces this through line of disease and how this also becomes like a significant thing to consider. The disease and the way that it propagates, and the way that like smallpox and tuberculosis are like ancient diseases that have been like mostly wiped out in Japan, at least, which like it's funny because like I know that tuberculosis has not been wiped out, and it has always been one of the leading causes of death for all humanity, but I assume it's mostly wiped out in Japan, which is the point. Yeah, it's interesting, and I kept thinking, like, where are they going with this? Because I didn't really know, like, why are we spending so much time talking about diseases and how they propagate?
Well, and Asakawa early on starts thinking of the tape as a virus, and he can't really identify why. He's like, why is this like a virus and it's spreading? And he like correlates it to a virus at first, because he's like, I won't let it be a supernatural thing. It's got to be something like based in science and real, and then like it's cool to draw that parallel over to what happens with Sadako, and then into the reason why all of this was set up, which is some of the stuff with the doctor. Yeah.
So speaking of the doctor, they figure out that this guy he's the last images. The last images are like of his face. He's got this big wound on his shoulder. It's like bleeding on the camera, it seems. And he's got this like crazy face as he's like looming over top of you at the end of this. And you feel like you're getting like pressed on by this guy. And they're able to identify him as this particular doctor. And they go to confront him, essentially, and find out what he knows. And it's a weird interaction, but let's get into what is sort of discovered here. So when the storm clears, the two travel to Dr. Jotaro's office, recognizing him as the aggressive man on the tape. Ryūji presses Dr. Jotaro for answers. The doctor admits that he became infatuated with Sadako and sexually assaulted her in an abandoned cabin deep in the woods, in the process infecting her with smallpox and learning she was intersex. Driven by anger and an unexplainable compulsion, he choked her. The duo later speculate that Sadako may have used mind control to impel Jotaro to choke her, essentially committing suicide. Jotaro then threw her into a nearby well beneath the lodge at South Hakone Pacific Land. Believing Sadako's rage and psychic powers projected images onto the tape, the two race back to the lodge, guessing that her will is to be freed. They locate the well beneath the cabin, and Asakawa finds her remains. Asakawa's 7-day deadline passes with him alive, convincing them that the curse is broken. The next day, they part ways, and Asakawa returns Sadako's remains to her extended family. That night, Ryūji senses his death is approaching. In his final moments, he deduces the actual charm. He calls his assistant and confidant, but only manages to scream before dying. Panicked as his wife and child's deadline approaches, Asakawa tries to figure out why he was spared. Ryūji appears in a vision and guides him to the answer. Sadako's psychic powers combined with the smallpox virus created a paranormal virus, and it wanted to propagate through tape copies. The charm is to copy the tape and show it to someone else. With 5 hours left, Asakawa races to his wife's parents' home with the tape and the VCR, choosing to unleash, quote, an apocalyptic evil for the sake of his small family. All right, and that's where the book ends.
Yeah.
So a lot to go over there as we unpack the ending of this, but let's go all the way back to this doctor. They go to confront him. They figure out that he assaulted Sadako, and like their conversation with him is weird. You have another, avowed serial predator, apparently, standing there, asking strange questions. They are so dismissive of this. Like, it's all about uncovering, like, where she is and, like, just getting to the bottom of this curse. And, like, there's no, it doesn't seem like there's any judgment on this guy for being fucking terrible. Like, I don't know. It's very strange. And, like, what he did is just, like, I don't know, it's kind of shrugged off. He murdered her. Like, what the hell?
Yeah. I don't think it's shrugged off by Sadako, obviously, and all the stuff that goes on, like, regarding that and kind of how this curse is manifesting.
Certainly not by Sadako, like but by, our main two guys.
These main characters, but we already know they're terrible. Fuck these guys.
I know. Yeah. It's just like, what? Oh, you killed her? Okay. No, no follow-up.
I wasn't shocked that they had this reaction, and I'm like, I also think it's really wild, just being someone who likes JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, that like there's a character named Jotaro in this. Jotaro. But
I don't know JoJo's. I've heard of it. I've never seen it.
Very different character. This is a horrific human being. But there's a funny thing with JoJo's Bizarre Adventure where fans of it will always be like, is that a JoJo's reference? Because like everything can almost be tied to it in a sense. So is it a JoJo's reference? I don't know. But this guy creating the kind of the original sin that starts this virus per se, and this curse. I mean, it's sufficiently evil, obviously. Like, it's like about as evil of a thing as you can do is like sexually assault a young woman who's in need in all these ways, and then like she what a horrific life. She contracts smallpox. She's like choked to death and thrown down a well. Like, it's just what a horrific series of events, and like for someone like that to be walking around.
The book goes on to imply, but it's not confirmed, but there is some implication that maybe this was caused by Sadako herself, and she like psychically compelled the doctor to do these things to her in order to like commit suicide. And then this is also where we get the really weird little bit here where Ryūji hears all of this and then states something like maybe she didn't want to die a virgin, and that's why she compelled him to assault her. And Asakawa's like, what are you talking about? Like, why would you ever do that? And he's like, I don't know. Some people don't want to die a virgin. And so then there's this implication that happens later because we find out from the assistant that she believes that he is a virgin. This is after he died. So we don't know, but there's this implication of like maybe he was actually a virgin and everything he had been saying was a lie. But that still doesn't like make me like him. Like, he's still terrible and lying about terrible things. And we also don't know that for sure, right? Like, so it's very strange. And just this whole idea of like
Also, how would the assistant know
shifting
for sure?
blame. Oh no, she wouldn't know for sure. That's just her.
She wouldn't know for sure. And then it's
Women's
like, is she trying
intuition,
to
I think he
save?
says at one point, he's like, I'm going to trust her women's intuition. It's like, okay.
Yeah. And is she trying to save face for a character that has a shady past possibly and stuff? Like who knows? And
She says that he like changes, he acts different around everybody he's around, and like for whatever reason, this like rapist version of himself is who he likes to be around Asakawa.
I think the most frustrating part to me about this character is that the author attempted really hard to make this character likable. And I'm like, I'm just never going to like this character. I don't care if it was fake. I don't care. You've already spent so much of it. I heard in graphic detail how this guy snuck into this house, and this woman since moved away and like has never been seen again and all this other stuff. And I'm like, too much evidence.
Yeah.
I don't believe that he's innocent. I don't know.
No,
maybe there's like there was an attempt there for some nuance or like some extra layer of meaning, but it doesn't work for me. So these are the things that I struggled with: the Jotaro stuff, the Dr. Jotaro stuff, and the Ryūji stuff.
Yeah.
But ultimately the stuff with Sadako and the way that how everything culminates and like they find her remains and they're able to give her this like proper burial, and then you're like, oh, okay, this is the falling action. We're all good now. Everything's back to normal. And then the Ryūji having a heart attack or whatever and dying is another cool twist where I'm like, okay, great, that guy's dead. And like
he hasn't actually escaped the curse. Like I did like that reveal, like, oh, it's not actually over. He in the last moments like figures out what it is, and then through some sort of supernatural way is able to pass this information along to Asakawa, who learns that, okay, so the only reason he was spared is that he enabled this. So there's the implication that the smallpox virus infected Sadako right before she died, and so her like psychic powers like somehow like combined with the virus, and that's why it wants to spread so badly, is it's kind of like a version of smallpox, but like psychic smallpox, I guess.
Well, just viruses in general, like they want to, that's why they talk about like why the sort of rate of killing people typically, that if it's higher, that virus typically dies off. So it's like, this is a super high kill rate virus that's killing people off, but it also wants to survive like every other organism, like a virus would.
Which is cool.
So it's an interesting way to tie it together. Yeah.
I was a little like, I wanted a little more from the scene where Ryūji dies. I thought this was going to be our moment to finally experience the death firsthand, whereas a lot of the other rest of it was like kind of recounted after the fact, or like it cuts away before we see whatever it is that they see, and something kind of similar happens here. Like we don't really experience it, so it's still left a mystery. Like what is Ryūji actually experiencing as he dies? We don't really know.
Yeah, it's a good point. I almost would have liked a scene where we get this character getting like whatever twisted.
Certainly
up,
deserves
basically.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But by not having it, I can also see it as like sequel material. Other ways
and maybe
to show more of that
in later books. Yeah.
Yeah.
So speaking of the end of the book here, Asakawa now knows what he's got to do to save his family, and he ends up making the decision of I'm going to pass along this virus to, I think he specifically is like to his wife's parents. He's like, I'm going to pass it along to them just so that my family can live.
Yeah, and it was talked about earlier how tough these in-laws had taken the loss of their granddaughter and stuff, and how like they were saying like it's almost as bad as being the mother and to lose a grandchild, all this stuff. And then he apparently doesn't like these people that much because these are the people that he's willing to kind of condemn. And you were asking before, like, would you do it? That's our famous segment, world famous. Would I do it? Would I unleash this curse on other people? I don't know if I could do it. I don't know if I knowingly could do it. But like the other side
once
of it,
you know it's real and it's killed somebody, it's a whole different.
But the other side of it is like your wife and child. Like,
but the other thing
would
is,
you
like,
find a stranger?
Why does he have to show it to them?
That's what I mean. Like,
why
not a
show
stranger?
it to anybody? Like, I don't know, man. You gotta find a better way to do this. Maybe he doesn't have time, I guess.
As much as that's probably a big part of it, but also as much as he seems like he cares for his family, I don't get, like, he cares for his family in the way that he doesn't want them to die. I don't get a sense that he's big family man, because he's like pushing off, like taking care of his child often throughout the story. Like his wife is having to do a lot of that. He like, there's this whole thing that's talked about how like they like kept their relationship kind of kindled by even through the child by leaving notes and stuff, and then the notes die off after a period of time unless there's like some information that needs to be conveyed. And it seems like he's like just kind of like lost something in the relationship of his wife and child. But push came to shove, he's like, you know what, the in-laws, they're out.
Yeah, they're out. Yeah, fuck them. Yeah, man. He continues to be pretty terrible even up to the very end here. And that's the book, man. Yeah, what are your thoughts overall? What was the experience of this like reading for you? Did you end up having a good time, or where were you at?
I'm conflicted overall. I would say that like reading the story, I was thrilled in a lot of different ways with like getting back into the Ring material, the idea of this tape. I love that it's now like this nostalgic like VHS kind of thing that's like harkening back to my younger days, and a time for a world that felt so much more analog, and just like there's that element to it. Obviously we've talked ad nauseum about these characters that I did not like and some of the implications of that from the author, but the structure of the story as a whole, this paranormal investigation, I find myself really liking paranormal investigations, like even to this day. And I would say that this is probably an early example of me experiencing that, especially from the lens of like the Japanese like culture, and look at like their own like heritage and how their like demons and spirits and ghosts and ancestors and all these other things like come into play with this character. I would say that like, because I knew the story, or I knew like kind of the bigger beats of the story, and again, this seems very different from the movie that I remember, but I knew that like certain things were probably going to happen, like certain like major elements were probably going to stick around. But it ultimately kept me guessing. I thought there was a lot of interesting like abstract thinking with it, but there was a fair amount to where like I don't know that I'm going to be recommending people read this story as much as I think it has a lot of merit.
So there's something I'm realizing we did not talk about that we need to. So it is the reveal that Sadako is intersex. This was a big reveal. There's implication that maybe this is partially why she was killed. There's also this just like weirdness talked about whether or not she could reproduce, and like wanting to reproduce, and like she wants to have children, and that's one of the reasons why the virus wants to reproduce. And it just seems to me like it is such a like someone who just doesn't understand being weirded out by something and then like othering it and making it into a monster. And this happened unfortunately a lot in horror going back into the day, and like I feel like the 90s is modern enough to where I can't like completely forgive it, but again I want to like give some grace because this is a different culture than mine. But all that being said, pretty gross to read, and sort of like I don't know, it just kind of difficult. It's unfortunate, and I wish it wasn't the case. Like I don't know why this was necessary. It's talked about a lot. And it's definitely talked about, like you could tell that the author thought that this was like really edgy, and like everybody reading this would be like freaked out by the concept and like grossed out. And yeah, I don't know. It kind of sucks.
It definitely sucks. And that is like with these characters, and then this description, this otherizing, the way that you can just tell that this is something that the author like was not equipped to speak about. And then on top of that, actively like turning that into like a monster, or like turning that into like an element of why this character is a monster in a sense. And like that is so
there was a lot of like the self-blaming stuff. And it's interesting because like I don't know, we have not talked about the movie obviously. We're going to touch on it later, but one of the things I do remember about it, and I don't know if you remember this or not, but I remember there being this element of like you think that you're putting her to rest, but then there's kind of this reveal that she is actually the monster. And I can see how that can grow out of this. And I wish that was more what this was. And instead it was just a lot of like, oh, we learned some things about her. The fact that she's intersex, for example. And this gives us like an insight into her psyche where we're going to assume that she wanted this in some way, and like that this is all part of her own messed up psyche. And like I don't know. It's like, oh man, it's just like I get what he's trying to do in some level, but I just don't think it works when you're doing all this stuff and using identity and yeah, these kind of biological realities for people and something that you don't fundamentally share, and making it into this supernatural horror. I don't know. It's just it did not feel like it was very well handled. And I don't know what else to say about it, but yeah, it was definitely it's just in line with several other things in this book that was sort of off-putting and I do not think has aged well at all.
Yeah, and it like I said before too, like those things along with these other characters that are terrible, and this the description of Sadako and the way that like Sadako's dealing with everything, and then also the fact that like it's all implied that being intersex has caused some of these things, and that's all reasons why I can't recommend this story.
Yeah.
And like I'm like, if all
Agreed.
of these were removed,
I struggle to recommend this book.
If all of these things were removed, I think that this is a much more fun story.
Yeah.
And I think that the
It's
film
not
does
terrible,
a fair amount
but
of
like, man,
yeah.
they have some parts that are
and I think the
tough
film does pull a lot of that out, and I'll be interested to see, like, it's been a long time since I've seen the film. I'll be interested to see if any of that's handled at all, or if they just stayed away from it.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Like,
I certainly don't remember all those little details and what might be in there, what might not be.
And I want to note too, this character Sadako in the Japanese storytelling and in the English version that we get, I forget the name of the character in the movie, but
Samora or something like that, I think.
She's a horror icon.
Oh, for
like,
sure. Yeah.
A character that like the Japanese, I think, audience responded to, and then would go on to mean a lot. Obviously, sequel novels. I don't know how much she shows up, but in the movie, like just like, I mean, countless references to this character, and then like, people being inspired by these sort of characters. And then there's a tragic story here that like you can empathize with this character, and you want to see kind of get the better of a lot of these characters. So maybe that's like a framing device that was used here that was like everybody else around is detestable enough to where they could or should die, and Sadako is like the hero of the story in some ways. And like I think that is like a maybe the film will deal with that a little bit more. Unfortunately, the way that the book dealt with it doesn't end up that way for myself and as a modern reader and as an American. But I am interested to see I'm interested to track what made Sadako so popular.
Yeah, for sure. Certainly an icon. One last thing I'll say that I noticed here. We didn't get much discussion of any sort of actual ring image that was the well, because I remember that being a big thing in the movie. And instead, we get the description of like an ever-expanding ring to describe how the spread of this virus is going to play out. Which I thought, yeah, so that's like an interesting change, and I love the idea of like there could be some of that going on as well, but you also link it to this iconic image of this mysterious ring of light, which I know becomes a big part of the movie. Is like figuring out what this is. What is this ring of light? What is the meaning of this? And that this kind of leads to the revelation of there being the existence of a well. So again, like that's one where I think the movie is going in a really smart direction.
I also like metaphorically, the ring is kind of like this like cycle, right, of it kind of continuing on, and I like the symbolic use of that, and like the well is a great idea, obviously, in the film, and like also like kind of I think is showing this like cycle of violence or whatever that's gone on with a lot of these characters, and the way that has come back around and is being spread on further and further, and it creates this loop. So I thought that like I think that's the sort of idea of it within this story, within the book here, and it's interesting that it's called Ring for those reasons.
Yeah, and like that again, that's like more what I've assumed it was going to be. But I think the only line we really get about it is this ever-expanding ring of sickness or something that I don't have the exact line pulled up. But yeah, it's an interesting change for sure. And I'm excited to see what the movie does with it. It's going to be a fun one to revisit. We will be doing that next week. If you enjoyed our coverage of the Ring novel, though, and you learned something you didn't know, if this is a novel now that you have interest in, or if it's one you have read, definitely let us know what you thought in the comments. Like this video if you're on YouTube, subscribe to our channel, and leave us a rating and review if you are on a podcast app. That tends to help us get the word out, and we would appreciate your support.
And be sure to connect with us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, TikTok, all of those at Ink to Film. We're really anywhere you can find. And also we have a Discord. If you'd like to join that, you can send us a message on any of those platforms or an email at inktofilm@gmail.com. In that Discord, we like to have conversations about these episodes or any other possible upcoming episodes or projects that we could cover. We also talk about video games and shows we're watching and all that kind of stuff. People send pictures of their pets. It's a lot of fun. So come join in that community.
If you'd like to support this podcast in another way, we do have a Patreon, patreon.com/inktofilm. And that's where we release our bonus episodes. Like if we were going to do the Japanese version of The Ring, it would be on Patreon. That's also where you can suggest projects for us to cover and vote on polls for upcoming projects. Is the best way to affect our coverage going forward. So if you'd like to support us, it's patreon.com/inktofilm. For as little as, I think, $1 a month, you can start getting a lot of benefits. So check it out, and we'd love to have you over there.
And thank you to Ross Bugden for the use of our intro and outro music.
All right, that's it, man, for this week. I guess we have about 7 days left to live. Yeah. So we'll have to get in our next recording before the deadline. And then we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Important. Maybe it'll count as us spreading the word enough, though, once we release this episode.
That's
maybe
true.
We'll get spared by get spared by Sadako.
We've created the psycho. What was it called? It was like a psychic virus. We've created a pandemic, a psychovirus pandemic. So,
I mean,
good job, us.
One could say podcasting is a bit like a psychic virus.
Sure.
And on that note, until next time,
keep adapting.